Story of Lynn, who refused to follow the usual rules and transformed a dreary office wasteland into a unique space that changed the life of an entire company. This is a story of courage, belief in her idea, and how one person can change everything around them. Lynn had always dreamed of creating a garden that was more than just decorative. After years of working in corporate landscaping, she had finally been given the opportunity to design something truly meaningful. The office building was surrounded by cold concrete, a landscape that did little to inspire the employees trapped inside. But Lynn knew what it could be, a place where nature and productivity could coexist, a space where people could recharge, collaborate, and connect with the world around them. Her vision was bold. A central water feature, pathways lined with vibrant plants, seating areas tucked beneath the shade of carefully chosen trees. It wasn't just about adding greenery. It was about creating an environment that would foster well-being and creativity. But Lynn's vision wasn't universally supported. Mark Harden, one of the senior designers, was dismissive from the beginning. "You can't build a garden in the middle of an office complex," he had said, shaking his head. "It's a waste of time and money. People want results, not plants." Despite Mark's doubts, Lynn knew she was right. This garden wasn't just a luxury. It was a necessity. It would give people a reason to leave their desks, take a breath, and find inspiration in the natural world. She wasn't just building a garden. She was building a future. But to convince the board and the company's leaders, she would need more than passion. She would need a plan that worked for everyone, from the executives down to the employees who would benefit most from the garden's design. As the weeks passed, Lynn poured herself into the project. She met with contractors, suppliers, and architects to ensure the garden's design would be both functional and sustainable. She spent hours sketching out plans, adjusting designs to meet budget constraints, and consulting with her team to make sure every detail was covered. But despite her hard work, Mark's presence loomed over her. He continued to undermine her vision, belittling the design in front of colleagues and casting doubt on the project's feasibility. Lynn wasn't fazed. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and she knew this project had the potential to change the way the company viewed their workspace. One day, as she walked the site with Jake, one of her trusted contractors, she felt a rush of excitement. The land was finally being prepped. They had started digging and laying the groundwork for the water feature. Jake, who had worked on many projects with Lynn, was as excited as she was. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to the space where the water feature would soon flow. "It's going to be something special, Lynn. You can already see it." Lynn smiled, feeling the weight of the project settle on her shoulders. She had a long road ahead, but she was ready. The vision was becoming real. She just needed to prove that it would work. As the project progressed, Lynn found herself increasingly frustrated with Mark's criticisms. He had no faith in the design and was more interested in maintaining his own reputation than supporting her ideas. But despite the tension, Lynn remained focused. She was building something that mattered, not just for the company, but for the people who would use it every day. Construction was moving forward, and Lynn felt both the exhilaration of progress and the weight of her responsibilities. The foundation of the garden was being laid, the water feature taking shape at the center. Despite the constant noise of drills and machinery, Lynn found solace in the steady rhythm of the work. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing her vision come to life, even if it was still in its early stages. The employees, at first skeptical, had started to show interest in the project. Lynn had seen a few of them peering out of the windows, taking in the sight of the workers planting trees, digging beds for flowers, and setting up the benches and walkways. It was a small start, but it was progress. Mark, however, remained an obstacle. He continued to question every decision Lynn made, undermining her at every turn. The garden was too extravagant, too expensive, and not practical enough, he would say. But Lynn refused to let his negativity cloud her focus. One morning, as Lynn was inspecting the site, Mark approached her with his usual air of superiority. "You do realize that none of this is going to pay off, right?" he asked, his arms crossed in that familiar dismissive way. "You're spending all this time on a garden, and for what? A few people might enjoy it, but that's not going to change anything. People don't come to work for plants. They come for results." Lynn stopped in her tracks, meeting his gaze. The old doubts crept up, but she pushed them away. "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "But what if we could create an environment that actually encourages results? People need more than just desks and meetings. They need a space to disconnect, to recharge. That's where creativity thrives." Mark's face twisted in disbelief, but he didn't respond. He simply turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Lynn standing in the middle of the construction site, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew Mark didn't get it, and maybe he never would. But the garden wasn't just for him. It was for everyone else, for those who needed a break from the relentless pace of work. As the garden took shape, the pressure on Lynn grew. She had convinced the board to approve the project, but there was still the looming question of whether it would truly succeed. Would the employees use it? Would it really make a difference in the work environment? She spent sleepless nights tweaking the design, adjusting the layout, and making sure every detail was just right. One afternoon, Lynn received an unexpected call from Catherine Lowe, one of the board members who had been skeptical about the garden from the beginning. "Lynn, I think it's time we discuss the final details," Catherine said, her tone measured. "The board wants to see a more comprehensive breakdown of the costs and the potential return on investment before we proceed further." Lynn's heart sank. She had known this was coming, but the thought of having to justify every penny of the project made her stomach twist with anxiety. "I understand," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll have all the figures ready for you. I'll prove that this garden will be worth every cent." That night, Lynn worked late into the evening, going over every budget item and cost estimate. She wasn't just trying to meet the board's expectations. She was trying to prove to herself that she was capable of pulling this off. The next morning, she presented her findings to Catherine, explaining how the garden would increase employee productivity, reduce stress, and enhance the overall work environment. She spoke with the passion of someone who believed in the power of nature to transform spaces and lives. Catherine listened quietly, nodding at intervals. When Lynn finished, there was a long silence. "I'll take this back to the board," Catherine said finally, her expression unreadable. "We'll discuss it and let you know." Lynn left the meeting with a mix of hope and dread. She had made her case, but now all she could do was wait. Days passed in a blur of anticipation. Lynn tried to stay focused on the work, but the uncertainty of the board's decision weighed heavily on her. She spent her days on site, overseeing the final stages of construction, while her mind constantly wandered back to the boardroom, to the decision that could make or break everything she had worked for. Then one afternoon, the call came. It was Catherine. "Lynn, the board has decided to move forward with the project," Catherine said, her voice calm but positive. They've approved the final phase. We'll need to make some adjustments to stay within the budget, but they're fully on board with the garden's vision. Lynn's breath caught in her chest. It was happening. After months of planning, adjustments, and setbacks, she had done it. She had secured the approval to finish what she had started. "You won't regret this," Lynn said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll make sure everything is perfect." With the board's approval, the final stage of the garden began. The space, which had once been a barren lot of dirt and stone, now looked like a living, breathing oasis. The trees were in place. The paths were set, and the water feature sparkled in the afternoon sun. The grand opening ceremony was planned for the following week, and Lynn couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had come so far, but now it was time for the employees to experience the garden she had worked so hard to create. On the morning of the unveiling, Lynn stood at the edge of the garden, watching as employees began to trickle in. She had worked so hard for this moment, the culmination of everything she believed in. As they stepped into the garden, their reactions were everything she had hoped for. Some stopped to admire the flowers. Others wandered down the paths, taking in the beauty of the space. For the first time, it felt like the office was alive. Catherine walked up beside her, a rare smile on her face. "You did it," she said, her tone filled with approval. "I can see now why you believed in this so much. It's more than a garden. It's a part of this company." Lynn smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had created something lasting, something that would change the company and the way people worked for years to come. The garden had been open for a few weeks now, and the difference it made in the office was palpable. Employees were spending their breaks in the garden, walking along the paths, sitting on the benches, and even holding informal meetings under the shade of the trees. It wasn't just a garden. It was a space that allowed people to breathe, to reconnect, and to recharge. And Lynn couldn't help but smile every time she walked through it. But despite the success of the project, there were still moments of tension. Mark, though quieter than before, continued to make snide remarks about the garden's lack of practicality. He would occasionally walk through the garden, clearly unimpressed, and often found something to criticize. His words stung less now. Lynn had learned not to let his doubts overshadow her own vision. One afternoon, as she was walking near the water feature, Catherine approached her, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Lynn," she said, her voice slightly more reflective than usual, "I've been watching the employees. The garden has really made an impact. People are using it every day, and I think it's starting to change the way they interact with the space and each other." Lynn's heart swelled with pride. "I'm glad to hear that. It's exactly what I hoped for." Catherine nodded, her gaze following a group of employees chatting by the fountain. "You know, I was skeptical at first, but now I can see the value. It's not just about the garden. It's about how it's changing the culture here. People are more engaged, more present." Lynn smiled, a quiet sense of relief washing over her. "I've always believed that spaces can shape the way people work. If you give them a space that nurtures their creativity, they'll thrive." Catherine gave her a nod of respect. "You were right, and I think I owe you an apology. I didn't fully understand your vision at the start." Lynn shook her head. "You don't have to apologize. I get it. It's hard to see something that's different from the usual corporate spaces." "Still," Catherine said, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished here, and I think the company is too. It's a big change and it's working." Lynn stood quietly, letting the moment sink in. The project had been challenging, emotionally, financially, and professionally. But now, seeing the employees interact with the garden, she knew it had been worth it. She had done what she set out to do. And as the weeks turned into months, the garden continued to grow in both size and importance. Lynn had always known that creating a space like this would take time to be fully appreciated. But now, watching the employees spend their lunches here, attend meetings under the trees, or simply take a moment to themselves by the water, she saw the proof of her work. The garden had become an integral part of the office culture, one that was not just admired, but used. Jake, who had been instrumental in the construction, came by the site one afternoon to check on the irrigation system. They stood together near the fountain, watching as the water flowed gently over the rocks. "It's beautiful, Lynn," Jake said, his voice filled with admiration. "You really did something special here." Lynn smiled, feeling the weight of his words. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's help." Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the garden. "It's more than just a garden, though. It's a reflection of who you are. You've created a space that's about connection, about growth. Not just plants, but people." Lynn paused, her thoughts drifting for a moment. "I've spent so many years trying to prove myself in this business. But I think this project taught me something. It's not about competing with others or building the most impressive design. It's about creating something that has meaning." Jake smiled. "And that's exactly what you did. You've shown that beauty and functionality can coexist." For the first time in a long while, Lynn felt truly at peace. She had done it, not just for the company, but for herself. She had created something that mattered, something that would endure. The garden was everything Lynn had hoped for and more. But now, with the project complete, she found herself asking what came next. She had proven herself, against the odds, against Mark's doubts, and even against her own fears. But she knew this was only the beginning. One afternoon, as Lynn was walking through the garden, Catherine approached her with an unexpected proposition. "We're planning a new project," Catherine said, her voice laced with anticipation. "A bigger one, and we'd love for you to lead it." Lynn stopped in her tracks, surprised by the sudden turn of events. "A new project? What kind of project?" Catherine smiled. "It's a large-scale renovation. Think bigger than anything we've done before. More community-focused, more sustainable. And we want you to bring your vision to it." Lynn felt a rush of excitement. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, the chance to apply everything she had learned from the garden to a new, even more ambitious project. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. "I'll make sure it's everything you want and more." Catherine nodded, her expression warm. "I knew you'd say yes. I'm looking forward to seeing where you take this next." As Catherine walked away, Lynn stood in the garden, her heart racing with the possibilities. She had proven herself, and now the future was wide open. She was ready to take on the next challenge, to build something even bigger, something that could continue to make a difference. She looked around at the garden one last time, taking in the beauty of the space she had created. It wasn't just a project, it was her legacy. And now, with the new opportunity ahead of her, she was ready to take the next step. The days after Catherine's proposal were filled with anticipation and excitement. Lynn couldn't believe the opportunity that had just opened up for her. A new project, one on an even larger scale than the garden, was on the horizon. and she was being given the chance to lead it. It was everything she had worked for, a chance to prove to herself and the world that she was capable of transforming more than just spaces. However, she knew the challenges ahead would be just as demanding as her garden project, if not more. She had grown accustomed to the difficulties of pushing an idea through, dealing with skepticism from colleagues like Mark, and navigating the ever-present tension between creativity and corporate interests. But now, armed with the experience of creating something truly special, Lynn felt more confident than ever in her ability to turn this new vision into reality. One afternoon, as she sat in her office, the phone rang. It was Jake. "You ready for the next one?" Jake asked, his voice filled with energy. He had been a constant supporter throughout the garden project and had already shown interest in helping with the next phase. Lynn smiled, feeling a rush of warmth. "I'm ready. It's going to be bigger, but I think I've learned enough to handle it." "That's the spirit," Jake said. "We're all in. Let's make it happen." Lynn hung up, and for a moment, she just sat there letting the excitement settle in. The garden had given her the confidence to take on anything, and now, as she began to think about the new project, she realized just how far she had come. From a woman with a dream to a designer who had proven that nature and corporate life could coexist. She had accomplished so much more than she had ever imagined. In the weeks that followed, Lynn dived headfirst into the new project. The company's vision for this expansion was bold: an open space for employees to work, meet, and collaborate, infused with sustainability and community-minded designs. But as she looked over the plans, Lynn realized just how much larger the project was than the garden. This time she wasn't just working on a small plot of land. She was designing a space that would transform the entire office's culture. Lynn met with Catherine and the board to discuss the plans. The scope of the project was vast, but it also represented an exciting opportunity to push boundaries. For the first time, Lynn was given full creative control over the design, without the restrictions that had initially held her back during the garden project. "There's no going back now," Catherine said, smiling at Lynn's enthusiasm. "This is your vision. Make it something special." Lynn nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "I will. This will be more than just another office space. This will be the future of work." As she began to assemble her team, Lynn knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The project was more complex, involving multiple departments, timelines, and budgets. But now, she felt a sense of confidence she hadn't had before. She wasn't just fighting for approval. She was leading a team that believed in her vision, and that belief was the foundation she would build upon. Months passed, and the new project began to take shape. The design incorporated elements from the garden, nature, light, and open spaces. But it was larger in scale and ambition. The space would feature green walls, rooftop gardens, and communal areas designed for collaboration and innovation. The goal was to create an environment that would encourage employees to think outside the box, to engage with their surroundings, and to feel a sense of belonging. Every decision Lynn made was a reflection of what she had learned from her first project. This time she understood the delicate balance between creativity and practicality, the importance of making a space that wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, but functional. And while the design was bold, it was also grounded in the idea that spaces could truly influence the way people worked and lived. By the time the project was completed, Lynn could hardly recognize the building. The once stark and sterile office space had been transformed into something vibrant, alive. The gardens, green spaces, and collaborative zones breathed new life into the workplace. And as employees walked through the doors, they couldn't help but pause, take in their surroundings, and feel a sense of pride in what had been created. One afternoon, Lynn stood by one of the new rooftop gardens, watching as employees gathered in small groups, chatting and working together under the open sky. Catherine walked up beside her, a look of satisfaction on her face. "You did it again," Catherine said, her voice full of admiration. "This place is exactly what we needed. It's not just a workplace, it's a community, and you've built that." Lynn looked out at the vibrant scene before her, her heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't have done it without everyone's support. It's all about creating spaces that people want to be in, not just work in." Catherine smiled, her expression softening. "Well, you've succeeded. And I think this is just the beginning." Lynn felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had started this journey unsure of herself, worried that she might never be able to make her mark in a world that often valued profit over people. But now, with 2 successful projects under her belt, she realized that she had built something that mattered, not just for the company, but for the people who worked there. As Lynn sat at her desk, the sun setting outside the windows of the new office space, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. The garden, the office expansion, they were just the beginning. She had proven to herself that she could create spaces that brought people together, that nurtured creativity and collaboration. And as she looked ahead, she knew there would be more projects, more challenges, and more opportunities to continue making a difference. The future, she realized, was full of possibilities. She wasn't just a designer. She was a creator of spaces where people could grow, connect, and thrive. And that was only the beginning. What do you think about creating such workspaces? Do you have any experience working in places that inspire productivity and creativity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you see the role of nature and design in the workplace.